story from Dramatic Dash, but Dash aware. You want to know where I am at all times? Your wish is my command. I've been lurking on this sub for a hot minute, and I saw a post that reminded me of my own MC story. Sorry for any formatting issues since I'm on mobile. This happened about 8 years ago. 1 year into just my first job, paid internship, clerking gig, IDK, what to call it. The firm that I worked for had a part-time program for law students so they could work and gain experience while in school. Very common in my country. I loved my job. I was very grateful for the opportunity to learn and grow, and I really enjoyed the work I performed. The thing was, I had classes both in the morning and the afternoon, night, and my school was at a different side of the city, about 8 miles away, that could turn into hours of traffic during rush hour in a city with 8 million inhabitants. So my days looked pretty hectic, as something like this. 5:30 to 7. Get ready and drive to school. 7 to 9. Class, 9 to 10-ish. Drive to work. 10 o'clock-ish to 1700. Work. 17 to 18. Drive to school. 18 to 22. Classes. Then I would try to study for 1 hour after class, and I would often eat while driving. During my first year in the program, I had more than proved myself and earned my place. I was that 19, 20-year-old idiot, type A overachiever that knew no boundaries. I had worked weekends, pulled all-nighters. Literally, I would leave school at 10 fucking p.m. and go back to work. Worked full-time in the summers without more pay, anything I had to do to keep the associates happy so they'd keep teaching me. As I was wrapping my first anniversary there, the perfect storm of awful rolled around. On the academic front, I started a new semester, and twice a week in the mornings, I had a teacher who was awesome but would finish class 20 to 30 minutes late. On the work front, a new partner joined the firm. Let's call him Mr. Asshole, AH for short, and kind of took over as unofficial managing partner. He was the typical old-fashioned lawyer that should be extinct by now. He could barely use Microsoft Word to type a contract and would pass out at the sight of an Excel sheet. He had this weird obsession with punctuality while simultaneously being late to everything. Plus, he moronically believed that by having a bunch of people warming up chairs, he would magically make money. So instead of investing time on client development, he would just spend endless time and effort on bullying everyone around the office. To make matters worse, since other people spoke highly of me, he decided to pay special attention to me. Unsurprisingly, shortly after Asshole joined the firm, started struggling. Now he could have tried to get new clients, send quotes by the deadline, and show up to meetings on time. But no, of course, the firm was doing poorly because we clerk did not spend enough time warming up the chairs. So he became obsessed with us getting there by 10 a.m., especially me. The issue was that I could not get there by 10 because my teacher finished class late and there was no way I could drive across the city in rush hour in 30 minutes. So Asshole called a meeting with all the clerks and yelled at me in front of everyone because I was always late, more like 2 times a week, but whatever. The fact that I had gotten permission from the program committee did not matter. The fact that I was working 6 or 7 hours every day while I only had to work 5 did not matter. The fact that I would work weekends and late nights did not matter. I tried to explain, but he'll keep yelling at me and would not let me talk. Having had enough, I left the conference room straight into the office of every member of the Clark Program Committee. 1 junior associate, 1 senior associate, and 1 partner, to say the same speech. I am late because I have class. I have proven my commitment to the firm, but my education is important too. If 30 minutes late twice a week is too big of an issue, feel free to fire me. But I am not leaving class early. Then went to my desk to do my work. I guess the committee informed other partners and word got around of what was going on, small firm, because as I was getting ready to leave for school, Asshole came fuming to my desk and told me, "I know you are lying from now on. I want to know where you are at all times. And if I catch that you are slacking off or lying, you are fired and I will make sure no one will ever hire you." So cue Malicious Compliance. The next day, I woke up extra early, 5 a.m. sharp, took a time-stamped foot and sent it to both his email and phone, since I could not risk him not getting it and him not knowing where I was. I sent a time-stamped photo every 5 minutes captioning what I was doing like it was my own personal social media platform of one follower. The cherry on top was that my teacher had worked with Asshole in the past and obviously did not like him very much, so he let me take photos during the class and diligently send them to Asshole. I even went as far as taking a photo of the toilet door with the text peeing, and then at the toilet flushing, all done. While driving, since traffic was really slow, I would send a photo and include how much I had moved during that time. Sometimes it was something absurd like 100 feet. As soon as I sent a photo of me at my desk, he shows up saying that he got the point, and I could stop. A couple weeks later, he simply stopped bugging people and started working from home or locking himself up in his office. My guess is I was not the only one to complain, and the other partner realized how dangerous he could be for the firm and asked him to back off. The malicious compliance was flawless, hilarious, petty, and overwhelmingly effective. By drowning Mr. Asshole in unnecessary updates, you turned his demand into his worst nightmare. It wasn't just compliance, it was a masterclass in proving a point while exposing his incompetence. Story from Infinite Simul Ego. You are the account manager? Good. Now they are yours to lose. TLDR? My boss asks me to just stick to my job role and not go above and beyond. I comply, leading to loss of a huge client and potential revenues. I work as a manager for a reputed institution in the learning, development, and consulting field. The person who hired me 5 years ago had to quit soon after, within 6 months since, and hence I had a new boss. We also grew from a team of 3 to 8 soon after. Now the person who hired me was a wonderful, patient, respectful man who had genuine interest in his role, his department, and the firm. The new boss, on the other hand, who had held various posts within the organization before getting this role, is a straight-up, self-obsessed, narcissistic, arrogant prick who is intolerable when he's having a good run and a straight-up jackass when things didn't go his way. I have been reporting to him for close to 5 years now, and I have grown a lot during that period. I had completed my second master's, gained respect from all our clients, and I always go above and beyond when it comes to client delight. Fast forward to this Monday. We are back at work since last March, lockdowns just that day. We were called on a meeting to discuss the past year and the way forward. We have had a rough year financially, and we had to achieve some ambitious targets. While giving the department head, no, my boss is only a middle manager and not the department head, a quick rundown on my key accounts, I had outlined a few conversations I had been having with few prospective new clients. He was impressed. Later after the meeting, my boss called me aside and gave a very crude speech about how I should focus more on my delivery areas and only pass on future business prospects to him since he's the account manager. He meant I shouldn't even be continuing to hold even preliminary conversations and inquiries with current clients for future prospects and potential clients. It was an embarrassing conversation for me because I have not been getting enough recognition and have been losing my interest in continuing with my current employer. And I was only going above and beyond. My sales wouldn't be rewarded anyway with any monetary compensation or bonus. This talk flooded me with memories of all of the times my boss had been treated me wrong. QMC. I have since been calling off all prospective clients and passing off his contact as my boss, as the one to continue discussions with, and that I would not be part of the calls. Since I had developed a mutual respect and trust with all of my current and prospective clients, they were curious to know why I'd not be taking our discussions forward, a huge departure from the way they have known me as a client-facing manager and generally as a person. I have simply been telling them what my boss told me. I'm simply a manager, and my boss is the account manager. I should focus more on my activities, and one of them is passing on all business prospects to him. I also promptly told them that I'm not allowed to answer their queries, even if they are preliminary. Now, some of my clients have been with us for as long as I have been here. Some of the new prospects are from the network I have built through my current clients and their friends. Our biggest client easily 1/6 of our yearly revenues, was shocked. While they knew my reporting structure, they also knew I have been the foundation and pillar of our relationship. They have continually attributed the success of our work ties to me. They also have seen how my boss treats me. They promptly shot an email to my department head and the head of the institution that they are currently reviewing our ties on the back of the evolving macroeconomic situations. Two of the other prospective clients have already told me that they won't be working with people who disrespect their own and have pulled back. Respective, professional, and respectful emails were returned as a reply to my email connecting them with my boss. So I'm off for the weekend with a renewed hate for my workplace. My boss is off for the weekend after losing our biggest client and close to 1/3 of the target financials, prospective, for the fiscal year 2021 to 2022. Note, we had an abysmal fiscal year 2020 to 2021. My department head is off for the weekend after reviewing some of these emails with my boss. The institution head has called me in for a quick chat next week. Edit, update. My boss just emailed me, copying my department head, who already knows about my Monday chat with the institution head, asking to set up a call between us, department head, boss, and me, and my favorite client, who contributes about 1/6 of our revenues, at the same time as my chat with the institution head. I am not acknowledging responding to the email because weekend. Update. I woke up to a reply email from the department head asking my boss to postpone the call with the client until Wednesday. Boss, further to our discussion, let's move the call with the client to Wednesday. Blah. Update. My favorite client had paid upfront a huge amount towards a new engagement about a year or so ago. They had to make a payment for an ongoing engagement sometime this week, but today we have been asked to adjust that advance against the invoice due. My institution head asked me about how we came to this point. We spoke in length, and I told him how and why I had to write those emails. While I have been bringing in leads and clients, my name has never been on the accounts. Since my boss had not given me top rating in performance appraisals the past year, I took his instructions on focusing better only on my deliverables and leave all account management to him. What happened next was not in my control. My boss had clear visibility on my contact with them, even up to last Monday, and he had had no qualms about it till then. I pulled out my emails and told him that I had merely connected my boss formally as the next logical step in closing the deals. We are due for a formal meeting on Friday. My head of department, my boss, the institution head, and me. I may be given added responsibilities going forward. Fingers crossed. Update after the Friday meeting. The head of my department brought the institution head up to speed on the recent developments. My boss clarified to the room what his instructions to me were. When asked to speak, I presented them some email samples and clarified that I had indeed followed instructions. I also presented copies of my previous appraisal reports. I asked for additional responsibilities with relevant compensation. My boss was not so fond of this request, and the head of my department concurred with him. Thankfully, the institution head was willing to give me an opportunity. So my first task is to engage with my largest account and bring them back to the table. Whatever sales commission that my boss used to get from this account will be mine to earn. This has painted a huge target on my back since my reporting structure remains the same. I'll train for the new role under my current boss himself, which sucks. All new leads that I bring in has to go through my boss henceforth. Again, a point of contention, because my additional responsibilities clearly include bringing new accounts, but I still would be reporting to my boss, who is an account manager himself. The malicious compliance was flawlessly executed, precise, professional, and devastatingly effective. By simply following orders, OP exposed his boss's incompetence, triggered massive financial losses, and secured a better position for himself. Story from Dancerman. Performance review metrics in retail fail to consider that an entry-level employee might possess basic math skills. I used to work at a department store where the majority of sales volume came from clothing, and the primary target customer was women in their 30s and 40s. The raises there were based on a performance review, and at my first one, I got a 3% raise. So for the next year, I busted my butt in hopes of getting the maximum possible raise of 5% at my next review. Well, when the time came, despite having a very good review, I probably had the highest scores out of the 5 or so people in my department, the customer service desk, I still only received a 3% raise. I was devastated. After leaving the office, I headed up to the break room and looked over the metrics in more detail. That's when I noticed that a full 30% of my review score came from the store's average score on the customer satisfaction surveys that print out with every receipt. Now, this particular company does not offer any incentive whatsoever to its customers, like 5 random respondents each month will win a $50 gift card, to take the surveys, and you had to fill them out within a fairly short time period after your trip. I think it was 24 or 48 hours. So even though we had hundreds of customers come through the store every single day, we only received around 20 to 25 survey responses per week, so 3 or 4 per day. And of course, without any incentive to complete them, a customer who'd had a bad experience would be far more likely to submit a survey than usual. In fact, I remember once or twice having a manager who just denied a grumpy Karen's demands discreetly tell me, "Don't give her the survey slip." So although we delivered a 5 out of 5 experience to 99% of all customers, the store's customer service score frequently fell in the range of 60 to 80%, varying wildly from one week to the next. Sure, there were times when our rolling weekly average would hit 100% for a few days, but I could never bring myself to reach the level of excitement over these occurrences that the managers tried to drum up in our morning huddles, knowing that it really just boiled down to us being lucky that whoever hadn't been 100% satisfied during that time period had just not bothered to fill out the survey. In statistics terms, the sample size of this survey was far too small to produce anything resembling an accurate representation of our true customer service performance. While I've never taken a statistics class, I have a passing interest in the subject, and based on the limited knowledge I've acquired throughout my life, I'd speculate that the margin of error for this survey score was probably on the order of 10 to 20 percentage points. This meant that nearly a third of my total review score was based on what was, essentially, a random number. So, I continued to look over the various factors of the performance review score and their associated weights, and I reached a few enlightening conclusions. First, even if I got a perfect score on everything that I could directly control, all of the factors related to individual performance, the only way I could reach that 5% tier was for the store's survey scores for the year to average 90% or more. An annual average of anything under 75% would earn just 2 out of 5 points on the review. Our store's annual average was usually in the low 80s. Secondly, as hard as I had worked on perfecting all of my individual performance metrics over the past year, I had gotten 4 out of 5 points on most of them, with only a couple of 5 out of 5s. This still left me several points short of the threshold for even the 4% raise. So I did some calculations and determined that even if, over the next year, I discontinued all attempts to impress my managers, put forth only as much effort as the employees that were college students, and just showed up on time for all my shifts, I'd end up with all 2s and 3s on my next review, but the store's survey score would actually help my score enough to still qualify for a 3% raise. So that's exactly what I did. I stopped trying to do things as quickly as possible, and instead worked at a pace that would avoid breaking a sweat. And mind you, for some reason, the store was always around 76 to 78 degrees Fahrenheit, so this meant I actually moved even more slowly than is my natural inclination, which tends to be a bit faster than your average person. When working a cashier shift, I stopped proactively scanning the spare copies of the coupons that were kept at each cash register for the various 15% off everything coupons that were constantly sent out in the mail. For every customer who came through my line, we were allowed, mildly encouraged, but certainly not required to do this, instead only scanning it for folks who explicitly asked me if I had it. If I wasn't working at a register, where it would be blatantly obvious, I'd spend 20 to 25 minutes on my 15-minute breaks. When working a shift on the sales floor, instead of working diligently and methodically to straighten up every shelf and table, I'd spend just enough time on the worst ones to get them looking reasonably decent. Then spend an hour or two just walking laps around the store, looking like I was on my way somewhere, stopping only when a customer flagged me down. Whenever I was working directly with a customer, I'd still provide great customer service, but for everything else, I was just phoning it in. Sure enough, a year later, the comments on my review were a lot more critical than they'd ever been. And yet, I once again had a 3% raise. That raise was oh so much more rewarding than any of the previous ones had been. This became my status quo for the rest of the time I worked there, until I landed a full-time tech support job and said sayonara to retail once and for all. I distinctly remember when I turned in my notice, the store manager said, "Well, we'll to miss you. If you ever want to come back for some extra cash around the holidays or anything, we'll bring you back on at the same rate you have now." I was making $8.43, while the state minimum was $7.25. My new job was paying me $11 an hour. I said, "Yeah, that's not going to happen." Edit. I've had several comments suggesting doing surveys myself. This was strictly prohibited. We weren't even supposed to do it for bona fide purchases we made. Though the store manager did one time tell us that we should all go ahead and do it once, just so we'd know what the experience of completing the survey was like for the customers. The malicious compliance was flawless. By exploiting the flawed performance metrics, the OP exposed the system's absurdity, proving effort didn't matter. They minimized work, got the same raise, and left on their terms, pure poetic justice and corporate nonsense. Absolute perfection. Story from itcoop... maternity wear. This happened several years ago. After onboarding a new job, I was told I could hire an assistant. The HR director, Kelly, handed me a stack of resumes, told me about a friend's daughter, and bumped Kat to the top of my interview list. Kat passed the tech test with high scores and interviewed. Well, so I hired her. Kat showed up to work on time, had a good attitude, performed well on assignments, and was generally a pleasant person all around. After probation, Kat was excited to tell me that her last raise was enough to get an apartment with her BF. It was a couple months after her raise, I started to notice Kelly spending an inordinate amount of time talking to Kat. The convos sounded personal, cordial, and Kelly was friends with Kat's mom. So I didn't think much about it until one day Kelly barges in my office. "Did you know Kat moved into an apartment with her boyfriend?" I might have heard something about that. Well, Kat is pregnant and her mom is devastated, and proceeds to fill me in on the details on Kat's personal life. Uncomfortably, I interrupt, acting like I have a lot going on. "This really isn't any of my business. If there's something related to Kat's performance that we need to discuss, please fill me in, but as for me, Kat is doing a great job." A few months pass. Kat's baby bump is starting to show. Kelly is again in my office. Kat is not in compliance with the dress code. Last staff meeting, Kelly handed out a dress code policy with a collage various women's shoes and dresses and suits, presumably cut from fashion magazines, to assist us determine what was acceptable from what was not. I picked up the policy and the clip art sheets with a stare reminiscent of Jack Nicholson's "I'm of a mind to make some Mookie Batman/Joker" scene. Is she wearing something in the not allowed clippings? As I began to spread the clip art around my desk. She isn't wearing maternity clothes, as Kelly points to the bullet about maternity clothes in the policy. Well, the policy clearly says maternity wear is allowed. Kat is clearly pregnant and she is wearing clothes, so you know what I mean when I say maternity clothes. Clothes from a maternity store. I told Kelly that I would talk to Kat, which I did. Kat filled me in that there was some drama with her mum not liking her BF, that Kelly is involved, etc., etc. I just told her to read the policy and be sure she complies. And no matter what, to trust me, I had her back. The next day, Kelly is in my office telling me that Kat is again not in compliance with the dress code. At this point, Kelly knows I'm getting frustrated. Okay, I'll talk to her again. This time, I want you present because I'm going to give her a formal warning and assign remedial training. I bring Kat into my office with Kelly present and formally read off my prepared statement, making it clear that it will go into her permanent file. Kat, you were given a verbal warning yesterday to comply with this dress code. Because it is not clear to me what is or is not a violation of this policy, you are to report to the HR office 10 minutes early every morning for the next 2 weeks for dress code inspection. Report to me if HR finds your dress unfit. If you are found to be in violation of this policy and are unable to correct your dress before the start of the workday, your employment will be terminated. By the time I'm finished, Kat is tearing up and Kelly is staring at the floor, speechless. I dismiss Kat. I hope that this is the last I hear about this because if I do, I'll fire her. As Kelly, speechless, walks out of my office. I told Kat not to worry about any of this. We have them where we want them. So, for a week, Kat reported to me that her clothes were fine per HR inspection. At the beginning of the second week, she was chuckling. Kelly told me that I look very nice today. Attitudes began to change and everyone was smiling. I got called to the red carpet by Jim, the CEO. He tried to keep a straight face as he recited what he heard was going on and asked me to cut the remedial training short because it was embarrassing the HR staff. Straight-faced, I said, "Well, Jim, if I stopped the remedial training, I'd have to fire Kat. Company policy clearly states that failure to complete a formal remediation plan is immediate termination. It is very clear. There is zero tolerance. You can't fire a pregnant woman for what she wears. I'm asking, no, I'm telling you to stop. Stop following company policy?" Laughing, he concedes, "Okay, I am rescinding that ridiculous dress code policy effective immediately." The malicious compliance was flawless. By strictly enforcing HR's own rules, OP exposed HR's hypocrisy, forcing her into a corner. The CEO's reaction proved OP's strategy worked perfectly, dismantling a ridiculous policy while protecting Kat. A masterclass in turning bureaucracy against itself. Story from Rust and Dirt. Dump truck delivery. 20 plus years ago now, I worked at a landscaping supply business driving a dump truck. I've been a software engineer for most of the time since, but at that time, well, mistakes were made, and I spent a few years driving a truck. These were single axle trucks, 26,000 pounds gross. We often overloaded them by about a ton. Mascooter was on the edge of the area we often delivered to, and we occasionally took rock or mulch to the high school there. I arrived one day with probably 4 or 5 tons of topsoil. If I recall correctly, I had to drive around the school and find someone. I suspect I'd been instructed on where to meet people, and those people weren't there. I asked after the name I had on the delivery ticket. It was written on there like I should know who they were. When I found someone behind the school and was informed that it was a math or physics, I don't recall, but something STEM-related teacher I was looking for. I think I asked that person if they could find the teacher for me. Eventually, I met the teacher and 3 or 4 students in front of the school. I didn't know any of them. I might have still been 19 or 20 at the time, and I looked young. It wasn't rare to be forced to find people for a delivery and everything was normal so far. I got out of the truck and was told that the dirt was to be dumped into a planter they had been assembling with decorative blocks around the sign for the high school. It was out, maybe 50 feet into the grass between the road and the parking lot in front of the school. I hesitated and might have managed to say, before being interrupted. I was going to say that the truck would leave marks in the grass. The truck, at 12,000 pounds empty, was heavy enough that it would compress the dirt, and even though the grass would only be flattened, it would leave a trail anywhere the truck went, likely an inch or 2 deep that wouldn't go away anytime soon. The tracks would be conspicuous. I don't recall if I got more than 1 syllable out before I was interrupted with a condescending tone, initially from the teacher and then from 1 or 2 of the students. I tried to speak again, and again I was met with a mix of disbelief that I didn't understand the instructions, and further attempts to explain what they wanted me to do as though I was 5 years old or didn't speak English. I believe I attempted to speak 2 or 3 times before giving up. I acquiesced, got back in the truck, and proceeded to drive out into the grass, leaving ruts that the groundskeepers would regret for years to come. The grass will be cut off level above these ruts, but you'll still feel them when you drive over them with a mower. I backed the truck up to one side of the planter and dumped dirt in until it was piled above the small semi-oval retaining wall, and I was signaled to stop. The sign was in the middle of the planter, which meant that the pile was only on one side. The other side was pretty much empty. I expected that we would want to drive to the other side of planter. When you dump enough piles of something, you get a feel for what it's going to take to fill a space. But after being told to stop, I got out to suggest that they would want more dirt here to fill the entire planter. Again, I was not able to finish a sentence. I attempted to tell them that when they spread the dirt out in the planter, it wasn't going to be anywhere near the brim. I also would have been willing to stay while they moved some dirt over to the bare area so we could dump more in without spilling out onto the grass. It was clear they had no use for anything I might have to say. The disrespect was clearly intentional. I'm not sure if there was some perceived slight or if this was just a wolf pack who did this to everyone. I was told to go dump the remaining soil. There was probably 2 or 3 tons left in the truck. It could have been put to good use in the planter still, out in a row crop field back behind the school. Here's another intricacy of working with a dump truck you might not intuit. Dirt doesn't spread evenly out of a dump bed. Most trucks have chains for the gate that allow you to meter how quickly the material comes out of the truck. These work great with small rock and gravel. With material that's more prone to clumping, you set the chains such that the gate can open wider and be less prone to clogging. But for dirt and mulch, it effectively just doesn't work. It hits the gate, compacts a bit, and is clogged. Then you can't release the chains because there are thousands of pounds of material pressed against it. You have to dig it out, which is a lot of work, even with gravity helping. And of course, the whole exercise was futile from the start. Thankfully, these people didn't know to ask, or I'm sure they would have directed me how to do my job, and then I would have been faced with either arguing with people who didn't care what I thought or setting the chains and then spending 10 minutes unclogging the gate of the truck. You might guess there's too much nuance in that to convey in a scenario where I've yet to be allowed to finish a sentence. We weren't having a conversation and these people were enjoying this for some reason. This was a long time ago, and I don't remember much of what was said to me, but I do clearly remember one kid slowly explaining, "Just take the truck over there and drive while you dump it out." Or something to that effect, with hand gestures, like you would explain something to a child. By this point, I wouldn't piss on them if they were on fire, so I wasn't inclined to expose myself to any more of this noise. I had them sign for the delivery, and then drove around the school and into the field. I felt a little bad for whoever farmed this field, so I actually did try to make it work as well as possible. I also doubted they had permission. I drove about as fast as I was willing to drive in a recently tilled field and started raising the bed. As topsoil is wont to do, nothing happened until the entire mass started sliding and essentially landed in the field in a large pile. You could tell that, if you knew what you were looking at, the truck had been moving when it was dumped, but it was still a pile that someone was going to have to deal with. I drove past the school a week or so later on another delivery. I was curious to see if they had gone out to the field to get some of the nice sifted topsoil when they realized the planter was barely half filled, or to maybe use it to patch the ruts in the grass. There were still obvious tracks leading to the newly constructed planter. The planter was half filled with dirt, leaving the back of multiple courses of block exposed, and the large pile of dirt was still standing out in the field. The planter stayed that way for years. I don't know if anyone ever fixed it. The entire complex was apparently demolished and has been replaced with a new building now. I moved out of the area a long time ago. I'm not entirely certain that this was malicious compliance. I wasn't trying to be malicious, but I wasn't going to argue with people who were being both insulting and borderline hostile. I held that job way too long, maybe 6 years, so I certainly had more bad or weird encounters with customers, like the time I guess I disappointed a couple trying to have a delivery man three-way. But this one was one of the worst. The malicious compliance was perfect and was executed with patience and precision. The truck ruts, half-filled planter, and abandoned dirt pile were poetic justice for the arrogant teacher and students. Their refusal to listen ensured their own failure, making the compliance both satisfying and deserved. Story from Current Fly 8346. Oh, that was Katie's job. I'm not sure if this belongs on malicious compliance, but I figured people will enjoy this. I was working for a manufacturer years ago. It was a small operation run by a husband, CEO and wife with a sister business of a front-end platform that was run by the wife's brother. The husband's mum and some cousins also worked there between the two businesses. With an operation like this, you had the typical micromanagement from CEO, minimum wage pay for top-dollar performance expectations, and the general nonsense you can expect in a setup like this. I had this job while in college and needed to build my resume. They let me have a flexible schedule so I could leave early for my night classes, and when I had midterms and finals, so I knew I had to stick it out. After about 6 months of working there, my job responsibilities grew tremendously, but my salary did not. There was a high turnover rate in the office from the "we're a family" environment that meant actual family got special treatment and everyone else was expected to do a crazy amount of work without getting any credit. One of my friends, we'll call her Katie, was looking for work and my company was hiring. I told her what she was getting into, but as a recent college grad looking for office experience, she decided to give it a shot. First, my referral bonus never came even after she had worked there for 90 days, and I was told that I shouldn't inquire about it because I referred someone to help the company, not to get the extra money. I wasn't in a position to push, so I didn't. I trained Katie in her role as she was taking some of my old responsibilities. Well, the CEO and the wife didn't like how much time the two of us spent talking to each other, or how much time we spent away from our desks, which was genuinely us using the restroom and getting water. This made no sense because I handled product onboarding and Katie suggested products for curated events, so it was important that she knew what new products were coming out and when she could start promoting them so that stock wouldn't sit in the warehouse. We separately had meetings with the CEO and office manager, putting us on probation for this behavior. Cue malicious compliance. We stopped talking as much in the office, effectively cutting me off from curated events and making it impossible for Katie to use our new products on the upcoming events. Events could be scheduled anywhere from a week to several months in advance, so it was a great way to boost sales and visibility for our new items. My friend ended up getting fired for having a brain and questioning some of the stupid policies. Also for doing something as outrageous as taking her unpaid lunch hour, showing up at 9 and leaving at 5. Normally I would have gone back into the platforms to curate events until they found someone to take over the role. But I was petty. I had been there for a little over a year. I was training employees, teaching myself the ins and outs of all our retailers' back-ends to upload products, coordinating with our factories overseas, the freight companies, and our warehouse so that products would be live as soon as we had stock and was still getting paid, like I did for the minimal role I had when I got hired. So not my job, not my problem. Fast forward a few months, the CEO decides to show up to work on the office floor instead of working out of his private office. Whenever he was on the floor, he was always super loud and disruptive to the general flow. I hear him talk about sales from the past few months, specifically about sales from events, so naturally my ears perk up. He starts getting louder. I don't get it, there's this huge decline in sales. None of our new products are getting any traction. I haven't been addressed, so I keep tapping away at my computer and act oblivious. He calls over the office manager, and they start hashing it out. 6 months ago, the sales for our new items went down significantly. I'm thinking, yeah, duh, that's when you told me and Katie to stop talking. The initial data that was supplied with product photos and descriptions weren't clear, It would have been a very long process for Katie to sift through the new products to try and match them to events, as opposed to what we used to do, which was she would tell me the theme and what she was looking for, and I'd get her data on a short list of items that she could review to match, to set events as opposed to dumping 100 products on her. Then 3 months ago, they became almost non-existent. Sales have dropped almost 70% with these events. 3 months ago is when Katie got fired. Eventually, the two of them piece together that they need to blame whoever is curating events, and the CEO starts asking everyone in the office, whose responsibility is it to work on events? Finally, it gets to a point where I can't stay quiet. The office is too small, and I play too big of a role in product management, so I chime in, "Oh, wasn't that Katie's responsibility?" CEO replies, "She hasn't worked here in 3 months. You mean to tell me no one has been submitting products for 3 months?" He is livid, and it's clear that I am now in the path of his rage. Why has no one been handling this? Everyone is kind of looking around, and the office manager, let's call her Karen, starts shifting the blame onto me, since technically Katie was in my department. Once the finger pointing started, I was prepared to defend myself. "Well, Karen, I thought you were the one who was in charge of managing and keeping track of every employee's role." So Karen replies, "I am, but you knew this is an important part of our sales and marketing." I reply with, "The week before she was let go, didn't you specifically get all of her passwords and a complete list of all of her tasks?" Karen replies, "Yes." She is clearly concerned with where I'm going with this. "And after she was let go, did you communicate to me that those tasks were now my responsibility?" Karen, "Well, no, but I shouldn't have had to." Me, "But you're in charge of delegating tasks and making sure all work is assigned to employees. Are you implying that I was supposed to know that you had a list of tasks unassigned? Why would I assume that you didn't delegate those to another team member when that's an essential part of your role?" Needless to say, while Karen was very annoyed with me, but I wasn't taking the fall. They didn't ask me to curate events. Karen handled that, which got them to hire another person very quickly because it was too much working for her on top of her other duties. The story of me and the new girl needs its own post, so I'll end this one here. TL Dr. Office Manager and CEO let go a very productive employee for stupid reasons, and then discover 6 months later no one's doing her job because they never delegated it to anyone else. Edit Part 2 is up under petty revenge. For some reason, it won't let me post it in the comments or on Malicious Compliance. Edit 2. Katie is doing well, for those who are asking. After she got fired, she was able to collect unemployment. She had had a job since high school and worked all through college, so she took advantage of getting paid to look for work, which was especially nice since it was on the company's dime. She has a good job now as an office manager for a company that has a few different branches in our area. The malicious compliance was flawless. By strictly following orders, the OP let the company sabotage itself. Their refusal to pick up Katie's tasks exposed management's incompetence, leading to massive sales losses. The perfect mix of pettiness, patience, and well-deserved karma. Story from a horse splashes. Calling a bad teacher's bluff. This is a story from back when I was a sophomore in high school, inspired by a recent Ask Reddit post about the worst teacher you've ever had. It's actually about my second or third worst teacher. So hard to choose, but definitely my most malicious example of compliance as a teenager. Background information. I grew up in a rural part of the Midwest and attended a school that was literally surrounded by cornfields on 3 sides. The district was so sparsely populated that my entire graduating class was only 48 students, and the local economy was mainly based on farming and steadily disappearing factories, so the residents weren't very wealthy. The combination of those two things meant that the school didn't receive much tax funding, which in turn meant that it had a lot of trouble attracting and retaining high-quality teachers. Somehow still found the money for a new sports field, but I digress. While I had several good, or at least well-meaning teachers who taught there because they'd grown up in the area, the majority were either new MED graduates looking for experience before moving on to higher paying jobs, or the borderline incompetent ones who were transferred from other districts because they couldn't be fired due to tenure, and basically did as little actual work as they could get away with. The characters, despite looking alternative, gothy at the time, oh how I cringe looking back on those hot topic-filled days. I always did well in school. I would have been the valedictorian of my tiny class if I hadn't gotten suspended for 6 weeks once. But that's a story for another time. Edit, story added. I made some money on the side by tutoring other students, which they usually just took as an opportunity to get the answers, but at least I tried to go step by step and teach them rather than just doing their homework for them. This will be relevant later. My friend L, who was also a strong student, has a small part in the story, and let's call the teacher in question Miss P. I mentioned above that many of the teachers were either inexperienced or lazy, but Miss P managed to be both. She had originally been hired as the elementary school nurse, but then the sophomore chem teacher quit at the last minute and the administrators figured, well, Miss P taught 1 semester of 4th grade science, so she'll be a good chemistry teacher, right? Right? Ron Howard. She wasn't. The incident. It would be a stretch to say that Miss P actually taught chemistry. She just read out of the teacher's edition of the textbook, distributed occasional worksheets, and dodged student questions because she didn't know her hydrocarbons from a hole in the ground. Not that people asked very many questions once it became clear that they probably knew more about the subject than she did, which she was perfectly content with. Anyway, one day Miss P was droning on about ionic bonds while I was sitting in the back of the classroom near the lab stations, talking quietly with L about something unrelated to class because we had already taught ourselves the material. Miss P noticed us, however, and called us out on it. Miss P, why are you talking in class? Note the wording. There wouldn't be a story to tell if she'd said, stop talking in class, instead, but she went for the rhetorical question. I was more direct than tactful at that age, which led to the first minor MC me. It's because we, Elle and I, already know this. Cue some snickering from the other students. Miss P definitely didn't appreciate my blunt honesty, especially since it addressed the elephant in the room, her lack of teaching skills. She could have salvaged the situation for herself by giving me detention for talking in class, or even saying, well, pay attention anyway. Zrania, Miss P. Oh, if you already know everything I'm teaching, then how would you like to teach the class? I'm sure you can see where this is going. Thus begins the titular malicious compliance. Me. Okay. And I did. The snickering intensified as I proceeded to walk to the front of the room and, to Miss P's surprise and displeasure, teach a passable lesson on ionic bonding for the last half hour or so of class. The details are fuzzy now, but I remember drawing Lego/puzzle piece-esque cations and anions on the blackboard to visually show how the total number of charges needed to balance, doing examples that weren't in the teacher's edition, such as having one classmate name a cation, another name an anion, and then working out the formula for the compound, and making a dumb joke about tin oxide and snow. I'm sure I was awkward and disorganized at points, but I was a 16-year-old with no time to prepare after all. I didn't think about it at the time, but in retrospect, I'm sure Miss P was listening for any opportunity to correct a mistake or otherwise put me in my place. Apparently, she didn't find any. The aftermath, it would be 2 that happened to say that my classmates clapped and cheered once I was finished. But a few people did tell me in the hallway afterward that my lesson was a lot clearer than any of Miss P's had been. Let me be perfectly clear here. That is a very low bar. To any high scholars, or reasonably competent middle schooler, reading this, I'm sure that you could teach a better class than Miss P. She never addressed what had happened, but she tacitly let me talk with my friends in class for the rest of the year. Her contract wasn't renewed after that year, which probably had nothing to do with me, as her position was a stopgap to begin with. In my junior year, we had a new teacher, Miss M, who was thankfully friendly, motivated, and competent. She spent most of the first semester of Chemistry 2 doing remedial work to teach everyone what they should have learned in Chemistry. Then she left the next year to take a better paying job in a larger district. But so it goes. TL. DR. Bad teacher tried to shut me up by asking if I wanted to teach the class. I accepted. The malicious compliance was flawless. The teacher's bluff backfired spectacularly, exposing her incompetence while letting the student shine. By confidently teaching the lesson, they not only embarrassed her, but also gained classroom respect. A perfect mix of defiance, wit, and justice. Story from one cash man. You'll wait? Okay, I'll make sure you do. Good ending. Hey there, first post here, I think. Grammar, spelling errors. Finders, keepers, TL, DR below. For the setting, I live somewhere in Western Europe on the cold side. Can you guess where? I work at a supermarket, quite the big one, and in our city, we were dubbed number one for a few years. That may or may not have been due to my presence. Kidding, I am a mere restocker and vegetable man guy. Every week, we have list of products on sale, but we have a rather large product range. This causes cases where only the 500 grams package of, let's say, cherries are on sale while the small, 250 grams, and big, 1 kilogram, are not. Cast. Me, yours truly, B boss, AC, annoying customer, messes with my co-workers, boss, shelves, and tries to win every single cent he can. CB, counter boss, not choosing beggar luckily. Also, S equals 250 grams, M equals 500 grams, and L equals 1 kilogram for the cherries. Note that AC's questions were things like the location of products while he buys those products regularly, or if he didn't want something he picked up, he would put it back in some random shelf. Ice cream boxes dropped in the bread shelf, for example. So I was working my shift about a week ago while B was in the back sorting the truckload that had just arrived. We get our cargo in set randomly stacked containers. Yes, we get oranges together with potatoes. So in the store, it was mainly me on the floor. Enter AC, AC. Hey, where are the cherries? Me. Those are right over there, sir. I point over to the cherries as I walk to the shelf with him. I notice the ones on sale, M, aren't there, but that the S and L packages are still available. Me. Sorry, the M packages aren't available right now, but you could take 2 S packages. AC. No, that won't do. I need exactly 500 grams, and yours are always emptier than the package says anyway. Just give me the discount on the 1 kilogram package instead. Mistake 1. If our packages always contain less of the product, then why is he buying the M size if you need exactly 500 grams? Me. That decision is not up to me. I can ask CB if she can give you the discount, but it might be easier to do that while you pay for all your groceries in one go. I wanted to get rid of his time-consuming nonsense, since his body language showed she was in a teensy bit of a hurry. Quick replies, quick hand movement, etc. And I had work to do. AC, can't you just call anyone? I'll wait till I get the discount. He shouts and immediately realizes he should not have said that last part. I have seen him a few times and he messes with a couple of my co-workers, hence the A in AC. Mistake 2. He seems to be in a hurry, as you always seem to be. Why waiting now? Are you not always in a hurry? And do my colleagues not rush if you have a question? Is that all to get your questions done quicker than comfortable? Are you hurrying us for nothing? Me? Sure, I will call, I say, without giving him time to rephrase. Here, the to me incredibly satisfying malicious compliance starts. I call my boss, then my co-worker in the office upstairs, then I call the oh so busy counter, and finally CB. This process takes up to 6 minutes, which I normally couldn't spare, but considering the circumstances, I was willing to sacrifice myself a bit. I did this all, knowing full well that the delivery truck had already unloaded all cargo and that the M-sized cherries were surely delivered, as we always get more than 2 containers full of sale products every evening. But hey, AC wants me to call and stay where I am, so I must oblige to a customer's wish. I continue to discuss while AC tries to talk too. The other people on the line heard and recognized him and then figured what I was doing, as I explain in full detail how the shelf is currently filled and what options I already gave to AC. Incredibly nice of you to shout so much, AC. I am that kind of guy that listens to what is being told. So, in the beginning, management was a bit cautious when I was alone on the floor. I once put discount on products because the smaller version of it was not in stock anymore and was told to communicate and ask for permission first, similar to this story. In the end, I proposed he gets a discount receipt for when the product is in stock again. I may be malicious sometimes, but I have a weak heart against hurting someone in any way for a long time. After all, I don't know what is going on in AC's head. AC was somewhat happy, and he now stops being annoying and asking whatever random question pops up in his mind. Win-win. To this moment, I don't know why AC so desperately wanted his discount cherries, but I guess I'll never know, as he doesn't approach me as much as he used to. Thank you for reading. TL. DR. Annoying customer wanted discount on a non-discount version of cherries and made me call whoever I could to make it happen. Now, he avoids me and my co-workers instead of hammering the most useless questions. The malicious compliance was flawlessly executed. OP turned AC's demand against him, making him wait unnecessarily while following his exact request. The patience, awareness of his behavior, and strategic calls ensured poetic justice. Story from AIKDXZ. Malicious Compliance at Work. 3 for 1 special. Back at the beginning of 2021, I worked at a small community health nonprofit with an insane CEO. She would constantly call team meetings to put down and belittle employees in front of the entire staff. Often, she would throw around some variation of, "Do I have to do everything around here?" and call everyone on staff incompetent. When we did do something right, she never gave us credit and always took the credit for herself. She threatened firing everyone constantly and would randomly call us to gossip and make petty remarks about each other, pitting staff against each other. One day, the CEO called a team meeting. In a group text chat between some of the more chill employees, we immediately begin sending snake and eye roll emojis. Sure enough, we get on the call, and she begins by bringing to our attention how Louise does not dress appropriately for work. Louise, who is also upper management, the COO, looks about ready to smack the CEO. The CEO viciously tears into Louise, commenting on everything from her hairstyle to her lipstick shade to how it's inappropriate for Louise to wear off the shoulder blouses that show her collarbone. She then tells everyone that we all had better start dressing more formally or there would be consequences. The next day, the CEO calls another meeting. We all join, and Louise turns on her camera. I immediately had to turn off mine because I did not want to be caught laughing my ass off. Louise was dressed from head to toe in what looked like something someone would wear to prom. Her hair was immaculately styled into an elaborate updo. Her makeup was professionally done with lash extensions and everything. She was dripping with, what I assume were, fake diamonds. Tiara, earrings, necklace, bracelets, and rings. And she wore the most ridiculous navy blue satin and tulle formal gown with a faux fur shoulder shrug to cover her collarbone. My best guess is that it was an old bridesmaid dress, but she never did say where she got it. The CEO was immediately fuming. "Why are you dressed like that?" she screeched. "You told us to dress more formally. This is formal wear. Is something wrong? That's not professional for work." "Oh, I'm sorry. I must have been confused. You said we needed us to dress formally, but I think what you meant to say was professionally." The CEO was livid, but Louise continued to rock the prom outfit all day, meeting with patients and clients and everything. Later that week, Tina texts our group chat and says the CEO is requiring her to submit a detailed timesheet with what she was doing and working on down to the minute for her entire day. She was going to BCC us on the email. Sure enough, it pops into our inboxes a few minutes later. Tina had literally detailed her entire past 24-hour day down to the minute. 6:45 a.m., awoken by husband's flatulence. 7 a.m. peed and changed menstrual pad. 7:02 a.m. began bowel movement. 7:10 a.m. completed bowel movement. 7:12 a.m. turned on shower. 7:13 a.m. tested water temperature with hand. You get the idea. Apparently, the CEO called her on her cell phone and berated her for sending such a detailed timesheet. Tina reminded her that she had requested her entire day down to the minute and didn't specify she meant her workday only. Finally, my turn. My job was in IT and most of my work was as a database administrator, but I often helped with other tech problems. One morning, the CEO called me repeatedly at 2 a.m. My phone settings have it so that if I miss 5 calls in a row from the same person, the Do Not Disturb mode is turned off and the phone rings. I see who it is, silence my phone, and refuse to answer. At 6 a.m., she calls again. Again, I refuse to answer. 7 a.m., refuse to answer. 8 a.m., refuse to answer. Finally, at 9 a.m., I call her back. She asks to hop on a video call. I've been trying to get a hold of you all morning. Where have you been? Loud sigh, can I help with you something? I asked, not even trying to hide my irritation. I literally rubbed my temples and slurped on my coffee loudly. You didn't answer my question. And I'm not going to. I was off the clock at the time you called. You're salaried, right? That means it doesn't matter if you work 100 hours or 1 hour, you get paid the same. So I expect you to be available when I need you. What do you need? I need you to reset all of our company usernames and passwords. We're letting someone go today, and it's company policy to change all of that. At the same time, Louise texts me that she is being let go. So I read the company handbook and make a copy of the page that says the IT person must update the usernames and passwords and give the information to the COO. I changed all of the usernames and passwords to everything, from social media accounts to bank accounts to QuickBooks and emails. I send the usernames and passwords in an encrypted email to Louise and then send the CEO my 2-week notice. 2 weeks go by. It's the last hour of my last day. So what do? Change all those usernames and passwords again and send them to Louise, who was also celebrating her last day. I log out of my email, put my company phone and laptop in the mail, and spend the evening cackling at my malicious compliance. The very next day, on Saturday, the CEO calls me repeatedly. Finally, she leaves me a long and howling voicemail to say what I did was unprofessional, and she would make sure my reputation suffered and I would never work in that industry again. I wait until Monday to call her back. Hey, CEO, I saw you called. I need the usernames and passwords to everything. I'm sorry, but I don't work there anymore. You will have to contact your IT person to help with that. You are the IT person. No, I was the IT person. Now I'm a private consultant and I would be happy to provide my services at a rate of $100 an hour. You changed all the usernames and passwords and didn't provide them to me. Correct. Per company policy, when an employee leaves the organization, the IT person is supposed to update everything and send the new info to the COO. I was leaving, so I updated everything. I provided all the usernames and passwords to Louise. You knew she was quitting too. Why would you give them to her? Because the company policy says to transfer the new username and passwords to the COO, not the CEO. Louise was the COO when I left. Caught in her own bureaucracy, she then had to spend weeks trying to gain access to all of the company accounts. On Louise's and my last day, Tina and another employee quit. Another person announced her retirement. Once the 5 of us were gone, we were followed by several other employees. In total, 11 people on the 14-person staff quit within a few weeks. The best part? I got a new job making the same amount I did at the shitty nonprofit, but part-time in a government position and with full-time benefits. So much for my reputation suffering. I stayed in touch with one of the employees who stayed behind. She's only 3 years away from retirement and is basically Stan from the office. She said they've hired at least a dozen people. All of them quit as soon as they could find another job. Anyway, I'm bored in the hospital and started going through old texts. Stumbled on our old group chat and had a good chuckle. Thought you all might find it humorous too. Names obviously changed. Edit. I'm still new to Reddit, so I had to ask my husband about the awards. Thank you all, it's very sweet of you, but please don't spend your money on this. If you want to show solidarity, consider donating to the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation so we can find a cure. The malicious compliance was absolutely flawless and was executed perfectly. Louise's formal wear, Tina's absurd timesheet, and the ultimate IT lockout were all poetic justice. The CEO's downfall was entirely self-inflicted, proving that arrogance and incompetence are a dangerous mix. The story from White_Trip 8392. No assistant for me? Let's see how that works out. This happened almost 15 years ago when I was still living in my home country. I worked in a warehouse that served as a distribution center for a supermarket chain. A very famous one, by the way. I was an inspector in the shipping department. Basically, the sorting section would bring to the docks the goods that the store had requested, and we would prepare and load the shipment onto the truck. In the shipping department, there were assistants who did the manual work, assembling the loads on pallets, wrapping them with stretch film, and loading them onto the truck, while the inspector checked whether everything being sent to the store was correctly labelled and secure for transport. Additionally, the inspector entered all data in the internal system, sealed the truck, and printed the load summary for the administrative department to generate an invoice. Of course, inspectors also helped the assistants with the heavy lifting. Most of the time, this didn't interfere with our main responsibilities and actually sped up the process, especially since our shift, the afternoon shift, had an issue with trucks arriving late. Many times, we wouldn't finish everything on time, leading to overtime and sometimes having to leave the remaining work for the night shift, which wasn't ideal since each shift had its own list of stores to attend to, and this delay affected them. Each inspector worked with at least one assistant, but sometimes more, depending on their workload. Some inspectors had more stores to handle that day, some stores required extra loads, or other situations that called for additional help. We had a supervisor who had been with the company for many years and had worked in the department before being promoted. The job was great, and everything ran smoothly, until a crisis hit another department, leaving it without a supervisor. Management decided they needed someone experienced to lead that department, so they transferred our supervisor there. In his place, they promoted someone from another department who had no leadership experience. Our department was running well with no need for drastic changes, but our new supervisor didn't see it that way. One day, I arrived at work, and as usual at the beginning of the shift, the supervisor printed out a sheet listing the stores to be handled that day, along with which inspector was assigned to each one. So far, so good. He made some changes, but nothing too concerning. However, before we started working, he called the entire department for a quick meeting. In this meeting, he announced that he had reassigned which assistants would work with which inspectors and showed us a printed list. To my surprise, there was no name next to mine. In other words, I was expected to work without an assistant. I protested immediately. I don't remember the exact details of the discussion, as it happened a long time ago, but basically, his idea was that as other assistants finished helping their assigned inspectors, whoever was available would come help me, something that already happened naturally as we had a strong sense of camaraderie in our department. Plus, no one wanted to be seen by the bosses standing around doing nothing. But it wasn't enough. It would overburden me. I tried to argue my case, but I couldn't convince him. Other inspectors were also left without assistance, but they were relatively new to the company and didn't say anything, probably out of fear of losing their jobs or something similar. Well, since I couldn't change his mind, I accepted that I would be working without an assistant. I took the signs for the stores I was responsible for, found available docks for them, placed the signs on the dock gates, noted on the printed sheet which stores were at which docks, then went to the dock of the first store I would handle. I leaned against the wall, crossed my arms, and waited. Goods started arriving, but I didn't touch a single box. The dock filled up, and I didn't move an inch. After a few hours, the supervisor walked through the department to check on things, saw the state of my dock, and asked why the load wasn't being prepared. I simply said, "I don't have any assistants. How am I supposed to prepare the load?" and remained standing with my arms crossed. Eventually, some assistants came to help me, and when they did, I helped them with the heavy lifting. But soon, the inspectors they were originally assigned to needed more help, and of course, they left my load behind. By the end of the shift, one load was ready to be loaded onto the truck, but another was only halfway done. I placed the paperwork with the load details in a visible spot for whoever would finish it and left. As I was leaving, my supervisor asked about the loads. Without turning around, I told him where the papers were. He asked if I wasn't going to finish them, and I didn't even respond. The next day, he called me in for a meeting. When I arrived, the manager was also there. They asked me what had happened the previous day. I replied, "Nothing that I remember." They brought up the incomplete loads. I explained that my shift had ended, and I couldn't stay for overtime, so I left the information for whoever would finish the job, and I even told the supervisor where the papers were. Then I took out my wallet, pulled out my time card receipt, and showed them that I had clocked out at the designated time. They mentioned that I had spent most of the shift standing with my arms crossed. I responded that I had done my job, which, as stated in my contract, consisted solely of verifying the load, supervising assembly and loading, entering data into the system, sealing the truck, and printing the load summary. Nothing beyond that. I continued by saying that anything else I might do during my shift was purely out of goodwill to help the assistants and speed up the work. But on the previous day, I had chosen to exercise my right not to perform those extra tasks because I felt unfairly treated by my supervisor, who had not assigned me a dedicated assistant. That would have significantly overburdened me with tasks I wasn't paid to do. The manager simply looked at the supervisor and said, "He needs to have an assistant." Then he turned to me and asked me to leave. The two of them stayed there for quite a while. That same day, I was assigned an assistant, and we never spoke of it again. Nothing like that ever happened again. The new supervisor's stint lasted only a few months before he returned to his previous role. He had put too much trust in employees he was friends with, but who weren't very competent at their jobs, and that was his downfall. Our old supervisor came back to his position, and everything improved again. The malicious compliance was flawless. By strictly adhering to job duties, the inefficiency of the new supervisor's decision became obvious. Management quickly realized the mistake, corrected it, and the ineffective supervisor was eventually removed. A perfect example of letting bad leadership fail itself. Story from Flatten Inner Tube. Want to start production without the letter of credit? TL, DR at bottom. This story goes back to the mid-1990s when I was working for a company that made small metering pumps used in the manufacture of many products. The biggest market was in the spinning of synthetic fiber, an industry that literally touches all of us, except nudists and cotton-only folks, every day. In broad terms, the fiber material starts out as a liquid solution, rayon, viscose fiber, acrylics, or a molten polymer, polyester, nylon, polypropylene, etc. The pumps push the fluid through a spinneret at a very precise flow rate, creating the filament that's made into the fiber. At that time, an average plant would have 75 of the pumps in service. A really big plant would have as many as 1,100. One plant that made cigarette filter material had a couple of thousand running at any given time. I was working in the international group when I got a fax, mid-90s, remember, from our commissioned agent Joseph in India. He wanted me to call him at home to discuss something. He had a customer that was willing to buy 340 pumps for a fiber plant. Joe asked if we could increase his commission from 10% to 15%. It seemed that the end user's purchasing guy wanted to, set up his retirement fund. Corporate policy permitted such things if it was local custom and if it was signed off by the GM. It was customary, and it was approved. In short order, a $640,000 order rolled in. I'm a hero, as it's the biggest order of the year. But the order has the caveat from Joe to not start production until the letter of credit was in hand. This was about 30 weeks before the end of the fiscal year. The pumps had a lead time of 16 weeks, so 14 weeks to get the LC. Piece of cake. Manufacturing and the GM were of course eager to get things going. Shipping the pumps in the current fiscal year would make a pretty good impact on the shipping dollars and would probably be enough to get the GM into bonus territory. So predictably, the GM is pushing the manufacturing folks to get started. The manufacturing folks were on us like hobos on ham sandwiches looking for permission to start manufacturing. First it was weekly, then about 10 weeks out from the drop-dead start date, it went to twice a week, then to daily. We refused to release the order because no LC was in hand. I was chasing Joe a couple of times a week for the LC. He kept getting reassurances that it was coming. On a trip to India, I went with Joe to the customer to see when we could expect the LC. It is coming? Well, okay. So a week before the drop-dead date, no LC. I was in my sales manager Tim's office when the head of manufacturing comes waltzing in looking for the release. Tim looked at him and said, "Our agent says don't start without an LC. We want to trust him, but make them if you want." Production started the next day. These pumps were mostly standard. Mostly. You see, the pumping bits were mounted on a casting that extended down to a foot that fit between two trunnions. The assembly would be pinched between the trunnions and pivoted over onto a gear on a line shaft. The pump had a gear on its drive shaft. It meshed with the line shaft gear and the pump turned. If this seems weird, it is the finest 1928 technology that allows a failed pump to be isolated and hot swapped. See this picture for some clarity on the weirdness. The standard angle on that trunnions was 90 degrees. But not these pumps. These were 105 degrees for some reason, so 340 pumps were made with non-standard ports, and if the LC never came, manufacturing is stuck with 340 oddball pumps. And the LC never came. Year-end hits, and the pumps are finished goods in inventory at $640,000. The real problems start when the GM ends up catching hell from the corporate offices in Illinois about the excessive inventory. Shit slides downhill, so sales marketing catches hell too. Joe found out later that the purchasing guy didn't have the authority to buy $500,000 in pumps. He was just trying to line his pockets. Shocking, right? Where's the malicious compliance? You want us to release the order? We'll release the order. Don't blame us if it goes sideways. Addendum. 4 months later, I managed to find another company in another country to buy the pumps, complete with the weird 105-degree trunnions mount. Did I get any credit for that? Of course not. I left the company shortly thereafter, being on the outs with my boss for other reasons, and on the outs with manufacturing for letting them make those damn pumps. TLDR big order is secured with the proviso to not start manufacturing without the LC to pay for it. Management gets greedy, jumps the gun, makes the pumps, can't ship them, catches hell for inventory, and almost eats the order. The malicious compliance was executed flawlessly. The GM's greed led to his downfall, as he ignored clear warnings and rushed production. When the LC never arrived, the consequences hit hard, proving that blind ambition without caution can be devastating. Story from birdspotter_4. I am an administrator for an institution that works in the public sector. The hierarchy of this structure is slightly complicated because of the nature of the job, criminal justice. I oversee around 20 employees. Those employees are supervised by 4 individuals with rank for 4 different shifts. Each supervisor has another ranked, lesser person to assist them, so basically each shift has a primary and secondary supervisor. They all report to one individual who ranks beneath me, and I oversee all of them. I report to the individual in charge of the whole institution, and that person reports to an elected official who manages the entire department. The tricky part is, the department has 2 divisions, and while this elected official oversees all of it, they really only run the other division. We have an employee who is very intelligent. However, his book smart is vast, and his actual experience in this line of work is minimal. He is a ranked assistant on one shift, so he works with the supervisor of one shift. He sends weekly emails complaining about all the other shifts and their mess-ups. He will write down everything from someone forgetting to remove trash, to someone making an error on a form, or even someone interpreting a directive differently than him. He makes it clear that his way is the correct way, and anyone not doing things his way should be written up. He shouts accountability constantly or sends condescending emails after a directive is put in place, usually because someone messed up, and advises me to, you need to speak directly with the individual that caused this change. Otherwise, they won't have a clue it's because of them. Basically telling me and the head administrator how we should be doing our jobs. He targets employees and complains about them demanding demotion and accountability, and badmouths us for doing nothing about poor performance. Meanwhile, I have submitted multiple demotion requests and write-ups to HR for accountability, but the union steps in and dismiss many of them. This individual does not know or see any of this because personnel issues are not open discussions, and it really isn't his business what discipline is put in place, but it's being done. He just does not see it or hear about it to protect the privacy of that employee. Recently, he has started attacking a shift supervisor on the opposite shift. Anytime something is off, he sends an email with her opus accusations to that supervisor, all of which turn out to not even be true or from that shift to begin with. He ranted about how he never sees the administrators. And in order to run a good facility, administrators need to be visible and involved on every shift, even citing. It's not that hard to come in late and stay late to speak to your employees. Basically telling us how we should be doing our jobs. He wants monthly supervisor meetings instead of quarterly, because this will eliminate misunderstandings of directives that the other shifts are doing wrong. Little does he know we had monthly meetings for a long time, and no one was able to make them, and nothing came of the meetings, so they requested quarterly meetings. I agree that visibility is important, and I stop in twice a month with night shift to check in and see day shift every day. But he never gets up to come speak to me during my rounds. He sits and reads or plays on his phone, which is allowed due to the nature of the job. He commented, I can't recall the last time I saw any of you, demanding that admins come in more to micromanage better. I was in a week prior, so that kinda upset me as he won't acknowledge me. So I started coming in more and told him, why are you sitting? You should be managing. There are things to be cleaned and sorted. You can count inventory of supplies. We don't pay you to sit around. This upset him because we do pay them to sit around until needed, if they have an intake. I then asked him why he was sitting in a restricted area. He stated it was quiet in there, and common sense shows he's not violating the rule because he didn't go past a specific point, so he can sit there. It's a corridor leading to another part of the building not owned by us. I read him the directive, which states, at no point should anyone for any reason go beyond this door unless in an emergency evacuation situation. I asked him again what was so difficult to understand about this request. He still found nothing wrong with going past the door to sit on the other side. I told him he has demanded accountability, so he would be getting a write-up for not following the directive. He flipped out saying it was such a minor thing and reminded him of all the little minor things he complains about with the other shifts. I continued to come in and micromanage everyone. A few employees asked why I was there all the time because we hired supervisors to manage the shift, so did we not think they were capable of doing the job? I advised that some people felt that they couldn't manage the shift and wanted administrators to come in more. The complaining individual got several more write-ups, one major one for an almost fire-able offence, showing that maybe, in fact, he didn't have all the answers. He sent an email to my supervisor complaining that I was micromanaging and being extremely anal with the minor write-up infractions that he now says aren't that big to even be reprimanded for. My supervisor asked, but this is what you wanted, is it not? You complained that you wanted us to be seen and manage more and hold people accountable when they mess up. The complaining individual wanted other people written up, but not him because he was never wrong, or that's what he implied. I went back to my regular twice-a-month check-in, which is just stopping in to see how things are going on the shift. The complainer has been quiet for now, sitting inside the allowable room reading. His superiority complex will be his downfall. I remind him that the newest employees are the ones we can learn the most from, and he needs to value knowledge he can get from anyone, regardless of their experience or rank status. I'm an administrator, and I tell staff I am always learning and will continue to learn from everyone. The malicious compliance was executed flawlessly. By enforcing his own rigid standards on him, OP exposed his hypocrisy. His demand for accountability backfired, proving he wasn't exempt. The irony of him complaining about micromanagement was the perfect poetic justice. Well played. Next story from Deadly Gerbil. Cut my job? Say goodbye to millions of dollars. I worked for a major US telecommunications company for over 10 years. One of the jobs I had there was as emergency overnight tech support for our major accounts. I'm talking about accounts like emergency services, traffic lights, the FBI, NASA, and the White House. I personally fixed the White House Chief of Staff's phone twice. All of this was handled by 11 people in a call center that was one of 2 in the country that were open all night, mainly for customers who were overseas. Because we were such a small team, and the people we dealt with were the overnight IT people at their various companies, we were on a first-name basis with many of the techs who called us. Then, one day, the VP of our company decides to step down as VP and take a job as the head of another call center. His brilliant idea is to make his call center the only call center for all business and government accounts in the country, including the ones my team handled overnight. Naturally, this meant dissolving my team. We were all very upset. We liked our job. Only the absolute best techs got to be on our team, and for good reason. When something we handled went down, it had to be taken care of fast, and some of the systems we dealt with were so obscure or old that no one at the company except us and our daytime colleagues even knew they existed. This also meant that we had to be ready to answer at a moment's notice, so we spent most of the night doing nothing, just waiting for a call. The companies and government entities paid extra for this quick response. Even so, over the years, my team kept getting assigned more and more little jobs to do between calls, which we handled easily because, well, we were the best. It was almost my dream job. So when we get word that our jobs are going to this other call center that, until now, wasn't even open overnight, we were upset. Yet most of my team was still pretty supportive. We offered to train the new techs at the other call center. Some of us even offered to travel there for a week or so to do it, but we were all turned down. Our last week on the job comes, and we're there mainly as backup for the new team in the other call center. We're not being routed calls, but we're ready on chat if the new guys have any questions. The questions start coming in, and they're not what we expected. Instead of asking about obscure, outdated systems that no one but us even knew about, the new team is asking us about things like how to fill out a timesheet for a shift that starts before midnight and ends after. And this was their supervisor asking me. We end up answering really basic questions that anyone at our call center, much less anyone on our team, would have known, and we all got a bit worried. Then the supervisor who asked me about the timesheets asks how many calls we typically get in a night, and I say, between 2 and 5 per person, usually. Then he asks how many people were on my team. 11, I say, 8 to 10 on any given night. Oh, the supervisor says, we have 33. I wondered why we were getting so few calls. They didn't have to do the little tasks my team did between calls either. They couldn't. They weren't even trained for the calls they were getting. The next week, my team was transferred into the normal overnight call queue, handling boring calls from people who didn't read or listen to the directions we gave them about how to make their phones work while overseas. Sigh. A week after that, other regular overnight reps start asking me and the other former elite reps questions about systems that only we would know about. Suspicious. A few days later, I get a call transferred to me, and it's one of the overnight IT guys from the major accounts. I ask how he got hold of me, and he says that the first guy he talked to transferred him to me Turns out, of course, that the untrained reps at the new call center were still untrained, so they were just dumping the calls into my call center's general queue and hoping that out of the 60 or so techs working there, the one who'd pick up would be from the former major accounts team. Since 3 of our 11 people had quit when our team was dissolved, the odds of that were pretty damn low, which meant it took multiple transfers, which meant they weren't getting the help they needed in the time frame my company was contractually obligated to provide. I went to the director of my call center to let him know about this, hoping it would mean that since the new team was failing that hard, the company would see reason and reinstate my team again. Nope. My director informed me that the team would not, under any circumstances, be reinstated at our call center. I could tell he was not happy about this at all. So then came the malicious compliance. My director told me, and every other overnight tech at my center, that if we were transferred a call for a major account, we were not to touch it, as we were not authorized to handle those accounts. The next night, the accounts wouldn't even open for us because our security clearance had suddenly been revoked. We were to transfer all such calls back to the correct queue. We were also instructed to forward any correspondence sent to us from the new major accounts team to our supervisors, whether chat or email. In a few days, the transfers to our center stopped. Now, I wish I could say that the company saw the error of its ways, my team was reinstated, and everything went back to the way it was. But it didn't. Instead, the company hemorrhaged major accounts like crazy. We lost accounts whose monthly bills were in the millions of dollars due to our failure to keep the terms of our contracts. Barely a month after it was created, the overnight team at the other call center was disbanded, and the jobs outsourced. Then the outsourcers started transferring the calls to my center. Again, I went to our director, hoping against hope my team would be reinstated. Nope, but the transfers stopped. Again. And the company lost even more multi-million-dollar accounts. Last year, the company announced the layoff of tens of thousands of employees. I wonder why. I saw the writing on the wall and got the hell out with the best severance package I could. So did my call center director. He was no fool either. All because some idiot executive had a bright idea and not even the slightest clue how to execute it. Edit. Thanks for the votes and awards. I especially love how people have listed basically every major telecom in the US as a possible example of this level of idiocy. Just goes to show that it's a systemic problem. I was afraid people might find this story too boring or depressing. It has a happiest ending though, because thanks to my generous severance package, I am now able to pursue my actual dream job of being a professional writer. The malicious compliance was flawless. Strictly following orders led to the company's downfall. By refusing to assist untrained replacements, contracts worth millions were lost. It was a masterclass in letting incompetence implode while securing the best exit possible. Absolute perfection. Story from Web Erderin 97. Write me up for following the rules? Okay, I'll follow the rules. TLDR. Delivered for a company contacted with Amazon. Got in trouble for following the rules. Reread the employee contract. Discovered more rules to push back, and the shenanigans began. In November 2021, I worked for a small logistics company that delivers for Amazon. I applied for this position because I love driving and am pretty much at home on the road. I thought I should give mass delivery a try, see if I like it or not. Well, this company ruined it for me and went the extra mile to piss me off. I found out on day one that I didn't get any formal training. Instead, I got inducted into a nursery program that included 2 ride-along. This means that in my first week, I deliver 50% of a normal route. On my first day, someone will come with me to show me what I'm doing. Then I'm on my own for the rest of the week. On the first day of my second week, I was moved to nursery 2, 80% of a normal route, and got my second ride-along. For the entire second week, I was getting hints from pretty much everyone that I was one of, if not the slowest, driver they'd ever had. Note that I had a whole 2 days of training. I don't count the rest, as I was not with anyone to train me. The rest of this story will all be about the second week. The first thing that really pissed me off was when the delivery app took me to an address that didn't exist. Like legit just a big dirt lot with some bulldozers and excavators. No mailbox, no buildings, nothing. It's Sunday night, so there's nobody around to ask. So I called driver support. The conversation went as follows. Me. I have a package that's undeliverable. The address is incorrect. Driver support. Just mark it as missing. Me. Why would I do that? I have it right here in my hands. Driver support. The undeliverable button isn't working. Just mark it as missing. Hangs up. I proceeded to mark it as missing and finish the rest of my route early and without incident. I returned the missing package to the warehouse, told the marshals what happened, and returned the van to dispatch. When I got back to dispatch, there was a write-up waiting for me because I returned a package marked as missing instead of retrying delivery. I told them what happened and was told to sign the write-up. I refused and went home for the night. On the next to last day of my second week, basically the same thing happened with another package. I was sent through the same ringer and called dispatch to explain the situation before continuing. I was told to just keep moving with my route, and they'll get in contact with the warehouse. I saw no evidence of this happening, as when I returned, there was a write-up waiting for me, returning a package marked as missing. I said to myself that I'm done with this shit. It's time to do something. I reread the employee contract and found a clause that every time the van comes to a full and complete stop, it must be turned off. Oh boy, did I know what I was going to do the next day. I came into work, claimed a van, picked up my packages, and proceeded to turn the van off every time it stopped. I was laughing so hard at all the people honking at me while restarting those big-ass vans. After about 2 hours and at least 150 restarts, it wouldn't turn over anymore. I called dispatch and requested a rescue van. I then killed the rescue van and the rescue van for the rescue van. I killed 3 vans in one day, LOL. When I returned to dispatch over an hour late, they asked me what happened. The nice way of asking, what do you think you're doing, LOL? I said I was following the contact and proved myself correct in front of my dispatcher. He wrote me up for unsatisfactory performance, and I pointed out that that makes 3 write-ups in a month. If he wants me to sign that, he'll have to call the boss in, then explain why I'm being written up again. I said, yeah, call your boss. I'm sure she'd love to hear why she's being called in at 9:45 at night. He dropped the write-up. I followed up by asking if one of the faster drivers could meet me at the warehouse 10 minutes early to discuss van organization. He agreed to this. I didn't show up the next day. The following is aftermath, copy-pasted from my response to comments below. TLDR. Other new hires quit right after me. One of them put on a show. I didn't put this in the story BC. I wasn't sure about sharing stuff that co-workers did. However, this story is getting popular and people are sharing their opinions and experiences. Of course, I'll add some juicy details. Everybody in the following story has been renamed for safety reasons. When I didn't show up the next day, I was Facebooked by a dude that we'll call Aaron. He just wanted to make sure I was okay. I said I was doing okay and explaining what happened. He then told me that this was the final straw for him, as he thought he was getting shit from Dispatch BC. He wasn't a very good delivery driver. I had been told by multiple dispatchers that I was one of, if not, the slowest drivers they've ever had. Aaron said he was told this several times and believed it. This is because other new hires like me were finishing much earlier than he was. He decided he had had enough, and we made a group chat on Facebook that had all the new hires in it. I explained why I quit and advised the others to get out before anything goes down at dispatch. I purposely took the time to explain that what I did was not the best way to quit, and that I'm not necessarily recommending that they do the same thing I did. All but one of them got back to the group the next day and said they just didn't show up. Several of them got calls asking if they wanted to continue their employment, as they'd have to meet with the boss lady. This was news to all of us, as the employee contract specifically stated that no call, no shows will not be tolerated. Basically, if you don't show up and don't call them to say you're not coming, then they consider that grounds to terminate your employment. Naturally, nobody called the boys lady back. I heard back from the last guy a day later. He said he showed up the day that everyone else just didn't show up, said hi and chatted with people, signed in, claimed a van and route number, and left with the convoy to go pick up their packages to deliver. This is the normal beginning of a day working for these companies. However, when he got to the warehouse, he started an argument with the marshals, formally refused to pick up any packages, drove the van back to dispatch, gave them their keys and whatnot back, and left. Essentially, he waited until they fully expected him to do his job and then didn't do his job. There's burning bridges like I did, then there's drying up the river just to fill it with gasoline. What he did is definitely funny from my perspective, since dispatch went the extra mile to piss me off, but that doesn't mean I condone his actions. Hilarious? Definitely. Good idea? Definitely not. I realized through all this that mass delivery isn't my thing. It's going to take me a while to be comfortable applying to other companies in the industry. That being said, I think I'd like to drive for a job at some point. The malicious compliance was brilliantly executed, weaponizing company rules against them with flawless precision. Killing 3 vans in one day exposed their hypocrisy while making their own policies backfire. Story from just add the /s. Mom told me to leave, so I did. Law enforcement got involved, and she lost everything. This happened when I was 15. My mum was, let's be real, she probably still is, a mentally, emotionally, and physically abusive narcissist. Some highlights are when she was teaching my twin sister and I to read at the age of 4 or so. It was around 2 a.m., and my sister was having trouble learning, so my mother's solution was to beat her with a sandal every time she got a flashcard wrong. Same thing happened when my mother had me transcribe an essay she had written to my handwriting when I was 7. Every time I started a letter from the wrong position, like starting a capital M from the bottom line, she would beat me with one of her Birkenstocks. This too happened later at night, so when I got too delirious for the exhaustion and pain, she would drag me by the neck and literally throw me into a cold shower to wake me up so we could more easily continue the waking nightmare. When I was 13, I told her to want to live with my dad. They were divorced, and she told me she didn't care what I did after I turned 18. I later figured out that this was because the child support stopped at age 18. Anyhow, fast forward to age 15. Our relationship was understandably strained. We had had guests, and she liked to use guests as a way of controlling our behavior through shame. It's easier to be an angst teenager when you're grown up. Friends from church aren't watching and judging everything you do. This made it easier for her to pretend to be a firm but loving mother, all while slipping in sideways comments like velvet daggers. Well, I decided I wasn't going to subject myself to the whole thing and spent the day outside in the woods nearby. We lived in the mountains at the time, so it was less than 100 feet from the house. When I saw our guests had left, I went to go back inside. My mother, perhaps unhappy at being denied a day-long emotional abuse routine, told me I wasn't welcome and that I should leave. My 15-year-old brain heard her words and knew that she only meant for a little while, but it also recognized that failed to specify any time frame at all. So I hiked a couple miles to a friend's house and asked if I could spend a couple days there. When my friend's dad found out that I was there and why he was pissed and said I could stay as long as I needed, I didn't go home that evening or the next. My mom became concerned and contacted law enforcement, LE, to report me missing. This is a big deal for several reasons. We lived in the mountains on a national park, so it was a very real possibility that I had been attacked by a wild animal, become injured while hiking, drowned, or been kidnapped. Nobody knew of my mother's abusive tendencies or the squalor and neglect my sister and I lived in. Most importantly, the law enforcement was the local park rangers with which she worked daily. Ellie immediately contacted my dad's side of the family to see if I had turned up there or contacted them. They promptly freaked the out and came to my house with lawyers on standby. Ellie then hired dogs to track my scent, and then everyone freaked out because the dogs tracked me to a nearby river where my trail died because the dogs couldn't pick up any more scent. Over the next couple days, there were people going in and out of my house, rangers, lawyers, my family, etc. And several noticed the overpowering scent of cleaning chemicals, but only the lawyer considered why a clean house would reek of chemicals. Ellie started to canvass the nearby woods and neighbourhood. My friend's dad came to me and asked if there was somewhere else I could stay. He told me that he wouldn't kick me out, didn't want to have to lie to the police or let the dogs on his property. My friend and I figured we'd just go camping for a week or so, but instead I looked up my dad's side of the family and called, and they picked me up right away. Understandably, everyone had questions. When I told them what was happening, the lawyers, horrified, pounced. A judge issued an emergency change of custody and prevented her from gaining custody until she underwent a psych eval and therapy, which my mother would never allow. The rangers, equally horrified, completely shunned my mother, and she eventually lost her job, since she was only allowed to live on the park because she worked there, so she was kicked out of her house. My friend's father and the trackers were members of the local community and churches, and they too shunned my mother. She lost her job, her house, her church, and her friends, all because she told me to leave, and I did. TLDR. Mum told me to leave the house. When I didn't come back, she called LE and reported me missing. When LE got involved, my mother's abuse and neglect came to light, and she lost her job with local LE. Her house, which she had through the local LE and her friends. Judge finally awarded custody of us kids to my dad, so she lost her child support payments too. Edit for clarity. I'm 32 now, this happened a while ago. Edit. I wasn't clear and didn't want to make it longer. When my dad's family got involved, they were able to reach an agreement where I would leave with them for a time, but my sister stayed. I had to go back to my mom's for a short while, but the judge issued an emergency change of custody, and my sister and I went to live with our dad. My sister and I have been in therapy, and she is teaching now. Life isn't perfect, but it's better. Edit. People keep asking about the chemicals. The house was normal trashed. My mother kept an untrained dog, and the carpet was soaked with dog feces and urine. The few times we had guests, we would have to crawl around the dog's potty spot and clean it up and make the house smell good. My mom freaked out when she realized that rangers and CPS might come round. She did a deep clean of the house before reporting me missing because she couldn't afford to have them realize what they were walking on. The malicious compliance was flawless, literal, strategic, and devastating. By obeying his abusive mother's demand to leave, he triggered a chain reaction that exposed her neglect, cost her everything, and secured his and his sister's safety. Justice served itself perfectly. Story from Ikusa. DMV customer wants employee fired. In my early career as a public servant, I managed a section at the Department of Motor Vehicles, DMV. I had one public-facing counter and 10 other employees in the back. I always told the people at the loan window to call me if they had a difficult customer, because I didn't want them to feel intimidated being all by their lonesome in a tiny space, in a lightly trafficked area. Well, my grumpiest, most difficult employee was always rubbing people the wrong way. And we had a huge meeting where I had to tell her that her job was on the line. In the future, I needed her to be rainbows and kittens and to call me before anything went sideways. So, 2 hours later, she calls me with this saccharine tone in her voice and said she needed me to help a customer. So, I make my long way to her tucked away corner, and this customer is towering over her and screaming with spittle flying out the corners of his mouth. My employee is literally pressed up against the filing cabinets to get as far away from him as she can. Irate customer wants us to find out what the VIN was on a vehicle he owned in 1955. Then he wants to know who owns that car. So, for part 1, finding the VIN, we can do a record search on microfilm for $10 an hour plus $10 for the record. He has to provide a credit card in advance and authorization to charge up to X hours for searching. He doesn't care how long it takes, he just wants it now, and he's going to wait for it. We had about 40,000 rolls of poorly indexed microfilm, so he could be looking at an entirely unreasonable charge. Oh, and he wants to wait for it. As for who currently owns the car, we would have to find every instance of that car's registration to find the last known registration. But we never microfilmed registration until 1996, so it's unlikely that we could locate it. On top of that, we won't give out that person's information without certain criteria being met, none of which this guy satisfied. So I walk up to this angry dude, and he turns on me and starts to yell at me. I hold my hand up like I'm a traffic cop and say, "Sir, I am absolutely going to help you, but I could help you faster if we used calm, quiet voices." To my utter surprise, he stopped yelling, but he began insisting that my employee be fired right now. I explained that we have a disciplinary ladder that we follow, and I will absolutely have my employee brought up for review. Then, I sent her to my desk with instructions to bring me the blue folder in my top left drawer. Then, I explained to the customer that I would need approximately 40 hours to locate his original VIN, assuming the film hadn't been destroyed by the ravages of time and assuming it was in the drawers I expected it to be in. I also guaranteed that he'd never have to work with that employee again. He signed off on an $800 authorization for time, and I told him I'd personally call him as soon as I reached the end of the 80 hours of search time or found his records. So, he reluctantly left when I indicated that I needed to go find what was taking my employee so long to bring me my blue folder and discuss the discipline I'd promised. So, I went to find my employee sitting in my chair with my blue folder. It was full of Dove chocolates and a note I wrote to myself on my first day there. "Everything will be okay." She was holding the folder and looking confused and scared. She knew she was about to get fired after that asshole customer, but I reached over, grabbed a piece of chocolate, told her to help herself, and plopped down in my guest chair. She started to apologize, and I held my hand up again. I reiterated that we had just discussed my expectations that morning. She was to call me immediately if she had any inkling that someone was going to be upset with her, which she did. She didn't engage, just called me and waited, which was exactly what she was supposed to do. I told her I had to write her up for following directions completely and document that her performance had improved immediately after our discussion, and that I recommended an early end to her performance improvement plan. So I sent a different employee to find the guy's records, which took about 25 hours. Then I called the guy to explain that we found his VIN, but that we were unable to find any other record of it after he bought it. We told him he could come down to pick up a copy of the record. The same employee he demanded to be fired was there when he came to pick up the record. She held one finger up to him to indicate that he should wait, closed her window, and called me. I personally walked down to deliver his record. He started yelling at me that I promised to fire the employee. I corrected him that I agreed to consider the disciplinary ladder and that he would never have to work with her again. Never did I promise to fire her. He left in a huff with his useless VIN from a vehicle that probably didn't even last 20 years before it got junked. And car junkies, it was some kind of MGA car which I had never heard of before that. Edit. My grammar sucks. Edit 2. TLDR. DMV customer demands employee be fired. DMV manager promises to take the appropriate disciplinary action and promises the customer will never work with particular employee again. Customer wrongfully assumes that means the employee is definitely getting fired. Instead, employee is rewarded for having to put up with DMV customer's asshattery. DMV customer never has to work employee again because manager insists on dealing with DMV customer herself, protecting her employee from continued abuse by the DMV customer. This was masterful malicious compliance. The manager upheld the customer's exact requests, but on strict DMV terms, making him pay $800 for mostly useless info. The employee remained protected and the entitled customer got nothing worthwhile. Perfection. Story from elitist. Political signs can only go up 30 days before any election? Okay. So back in August, my wife and I decided we wanted to put up a sign to promote our preferred candidate for the upcoming presidential election here in Texas. I wanted to see what my town's ordinances said about what and where we could put the sign up, as we were planning to put a banner on our fence that is very prominent facing traffic that goes along the side of our house, but that is at the edge of our property. The ordinances had a few rules about where the sign could and couldn't be, e.g., don't put them on a utility pole, the max size of the sign, 36 square feet, how high off the ground, etc. It also said that political signs would be allowed 30 days prior to any election. Note here it didn't say the election, which would have implied that the election had to be related to the sign. As far as I was concerned, it could be, as the ordinance said in plain English, any election. So we ordered a 36 square foot banner off of Etsy, nailed and tied it to the fence on a Saturday in August. The next Monday, code enforcement dropped by and said something along the lines, "We had an inquiry about your sign. It isn't in compliance with the ordinance," and asked us to take it down. I wasn't home at the time. My wife told him that I wasn't home, but that I had read the ordinance and it said any election, and that we were in compliance. There was some back and forth. They settled on, if you request a sign permit that would give us a month with the sign up, then we would be within 30 days of early voting in Texas, which is how the town has traditionally interpreted the meaning of 30 days prior to any election. So I get home from running the errand I was on, and my wife tells me what has transpired. I still thought the sign was legal under the ordinance, but to make my wife happy, I applied for and was granted the permit. 2 days later, the same code enforcement officer came to our house and said that the town manager had overruled his issuing of the permit and that the sign needed to come down. I told him that I only applied for the permit to make my wife happy and that the sign has always been legal under the ordinance and that the town was not without choices as it could clean up the language in the ordinance. More back and forth. I asked him what the next steps were, you know. Do you remove the sign would have made great footage from my security camera? Do you cite me? Etc., etc. He said he would talk to the town manager. I said that I would be happy to discuss it with the town manager. So the town manager calls me later that day. Says things like, most people don't put 36 square foot signs on residential property. I told him that I wasn't most people. That I was following the letter of the ordinance and that the sign was up in accordance with any election, including the fact that several of the 54 primaries are currently happening, and that those are all elections for the purposes of the ordinance. He says that he would contact the town's lawyer. Hours later, he calls back. I guess the town's lawyer was not busy that day and was able to opine instantly on the matter. He says the town's lawyer thinks the ordinance is enforceable, but that they have decided to not take an enforcement action. I told him I still believed I was in compliance because I was following the any election provision, but that he was making the right choice, as there was a pandemic going on. But I had also been doing some research. Many people think of Texas as very similar to the rest of the South where local government is best. But my understanding of how things work in Texas is that cities and towns cannot do things that the state doesn't allow them to do. So things are often enumerated or restricted at the state level. And it just so happens that Texas has a chapter on political signs. Title 15 is Regulating Political Funds and Campaigns, and Chapter 259 is Political Signs. 259.003 is titled Regulation of Political Signs by Municipality, and says in part, a municipal charter provision or ordinance that regulates signs may not, for a sign that contains primarily a political message, and that is located on private real property with the consent of the property owner, prohibit the sign from being placed. It looks like there are some caveats elsewhere in the chapter, such as it applies to signs 36 square feet and smaller, etc., but definitely applies to my circumstances. So the town's ordinance restricts someone from placing a political sign 30 days before any election. It sure seems like that violates this section of Texas law. Now armed with some information, I went to town council and spoke at one of the open forums where residents can address the council on any topic. My town is pretty small, full of people who don't share my political views, and the council reflects that pretty well. But I told them about how the ordinance appeared to violate Texas law. I also told them about a recent Supreme Court ruling from 2015 that set a bit of a surprising precedent. Basically, under certain conditions, the town might have to survive strict scrutiny when taking enforcement actions on signs and demonstrate a narrowly tailored, compelling government interest for why certain signs could only be up for short times versus other signs being up for longer times. Anyway, the town has worked with me on this issue, and the town manager is a busy person, but did say that the town's lawyer and him would circle up and propose changes to council in the coming months. I hope this post inspires you to get out there and vote and also engage with your government at the local, state, and national level. The malicious compliance was executed flawlessly. By adhering strictly to the ordinance's vague wording, the OP exposed the town's overreach. Backing it with state law and Supreme Court precedent forced officials to back down. A masterclass in using rules against the rulemakers. Story from Wandering Black Cat. If you're not happy, then quit. Okay, boss. Hello, everyone. Thanks for all your comments. I deeply appreciate it and get motivated to share more of my stories. Those who read my previous stories may know that I'm a jack of all trades, and I made a lot of different jobs before staying in the hospitality industry for a while. I never quit a job in my whole life without giving a suitable notice. But not this time. My encounter with one of the worst managers I have ever had the misfortune to work for. My family was not rich, and I needed to get as much money as possible after I turned legally able to work to pay for my school tuition. I worked for a temp agency specialized in logistic and transport jobs. I took as many jobs as possible, day jobs, 2 hours paid only jobs, weekly jobs, and always made my employer satisfied. They trusted me even for the toughest jobs you can imagine. I have one simple rule. Treat me with respect, and I will respectfully work for you. Even doing sometimes overtime is fine by me as long as the employer is nice. This is the story about me working for a new warehouse dealing with shipments. We were about 10 young men, all university students, and would have to work from 3 a.m. to 8 a.m. from Monday to Friday. No overtime, no extra pay on night shifts, just the basic minimum wage and nothing else. No cash for food or gas money. Our job was to dispatch all kind of parcels into different trucks. It was summer, so it was damn hot. So hot you could grill a steak on the pavement. Edit. I know this may confuse some people. I may have chosen a bad metaphor. Nights on summer are usually between 18 to 25 degrees Celsius. Bearable. But working and running around wearing safety boots and jeans made us sweat like crazy. At 5:30, and packing stuff in trucks was also horrible. It literally felt like being in a sauna. At 6 a.m, we could already get between 25 to 30 degrees. And of course, no aircon. But that makes sense as doors were always kept opened. Not only the job was tough, but the warehouse managers barely respected safety rules. For example, parcels that exceed 25 kilos are not allowed to be carried alone. When one of us dared to tell the asshole manager, let's call him A-hole, that it was way too heavy to be lifted alone, he would just say, "Don't be a pa. Everyone here is doing the same job. If they can lift it, you can do it. And if you are not happy about it, just leave. You're not irreplaceable." He kept yelling the same things over and over in that small warehouse. We were all assigned to a different gate. Therefore, we were all working alone, but not too far from each other. Days were always busy, and we could only have 5-minute break for a quick shot in the toilets or a quick smoke. The worst was for the people assigned at the bottom end of the warehouse. They literally had to run the whole way if they wanted to take a trip to the washroom. Worst thing? A hole barely helped anyone on the floor. He just spent his time walking around and yelling, "Don't forget, you're not irreplaceable. There are plenty of people begging for a job outside willing to take your place." And the one I hated the most, "If you're not happy, then leave." The job was already painful enough. Why did he need it to make more annoying? Sometimes parcels could barely fit inside a truck as it was getting fully loaded. A-hole would usually yell at us for being incompetent and would literally kick parcels, smashing the content to make it fit inside the truck, and proudly says, "You see? How can this be that complicated?" The icing on the cake was one night. We arrived, as always, at 2:45 a.m., all of us feeling asleep and no one to open the gate for us. We waited until 3:30, until A-hole arrived and straight away yelled on us, "What the hit are you doing here?" "Well, we are here to work." "The trucks have been delayed. No need for you to be here. Get back home." "Are we still going to be paid?" "We showed up. No one told us not to come." He smudged. "Why would you be paid? You are not working. Now get back home and no need to come unless we call you." We were stunned and damn furious. As A-hole left, we all agreed on a few things. Here is where the revenge starts. No one showed at work the next day. I received a call from an angry A-hole at 3:30. "Where the hell are you? There is work to be done. You told us not to come unless you'd call us." "Then what do you think I'm doing right now? Get the hinders up and get here." "I'm sorry, A-hole, but you are not my employer. I'm employed by temp agency name. Therefore, all shifts must be confirmed by my employer before allowing me to go on site. The office opens at 8:30, so please call them and they will call me." I hung up. At around 9 a.m., I received a call from my temp agency asking why all of us did not show up. I gently explained everything, and the agency asked me if I could go there now. I explained that I could not, as I have to attend some classes. After a short conversation about the working conditions we had, the agency asked me if I could go there the day after. I told them that I cools probably finished the week. It was weekly contract, but I would not be interested to stay longer. They understood. We all showed up the day after, and sure enough, A-hole was pied. He's starting yelling on us as always, stating we were a damn spoiled generation that knows nothing about hard work and take everything for granted, etc. And we all got back to work. Again, he started the same thing, not helping, but just yelling around. If you're not happy, then quit. You're not irreplaceable. I stopped putting parcels in the truck and said, "You're totally right, A-hole. I'm not happy, so I quit." "What the he are you talking about? Get back to work." "You just told me that if I was not happy, I could quit. Then you're right, I quit. Get back to work or I'll—" "Or you'll what?" I asked gently. "A-hole is right. I quit too," said another staff. And within a few minutes, the 10 of us left the warehouse, as A-hole kept screaming, "He'll get our too." It was 5:30 a.m. and there is a ton of work to do. But only A-hole and some management staff in the office were there, left with a crap ton of work to do. I received another call from my temp agency who asked what happened. How can 10 people decided to leave their job on the spot like that? I explained that I simply did what A-hole told me. I'm not happy. So I quit. And then I added all safety process that was respected at work. No safety gloves provided, no earplugs provided, carrying heavy goods without any help, etc. They told me they would have a meeting with the person in charge, but to please never do something like this again. And yeah, I still worked from time to time for this temp agency after that. My conclusion, and what I learned from that: treat people with respect, and they will respect you. Treat them like crap, and karma will simply hit you. Hope you enjoyed that story. The malicious compliance was flawless. By following the manager's own words, the entire team exposed his incompetence, left him drowning in unfinished tasks, and ensured management faced consequences. A perfect example of karma in action.